Echoes from the labyrinth. The splendor of Minoan Crete. From the azure embrace of the Aegean Sea rises Crete, an island steeped in the whispers of an ancient majesty. Here, between approximately 2700 and 1450 BCE, flourished the enigmatic and utterly captivating Minoan civilization, a Bronze Age culture so sophisticated, so vibrant, and so profoundly influential that its memory resonates still through the very bedrock of Western civilization. Forget, for a moment, the battle-hardened city-states and formidable hoplites of later Greek history. The Minoans present a different vision entirely, one of grand palaces, exuberant art, and an unparalleled dominion over the waves. At the heart of Minoan society lay its magnificent palatial centers, chief among them the sprawling complex of Knossos. Far from mere royal residences, these palaces, including those at Phaistos, Mallia, and Zakros, were colossal, multi-storied labyrinths of human endeavor. They served as administrative hubs, religious sanctuaries, economic powerhouses, and artistic workshops, all rolled into one breathtaking architectural marvel. Imagine entering Knossos. Not a fortress designed for defense, but an open, sprawling complex, testament to a society seemingly devoid of external threats. Courtyards bustled with activity, light wells illuminated subterranean passages, and vast storage magazines, lined with enormous pithoi, storage jars, hinted at a highly organized agricultural surplus and extensive trade. The architecture itself was innovative, featuring sophisticated drainage systems, frescoed walls, and even a form of early plumbing that speaks to an advanced understanding of engineering. The very layout, intricate and sprawling, undoubtedly fueled the later Greek myths of King Minos and his labyrinthine prison for the Minotaur. Yet, it was arguably their art that truly set the Minoans apart. A walk through a restored Minoan palace or a visit to a museum showcasing their artifacts is to step into a world of unparalleled dynamism and color. Unlike the more martial or monumental art of their contemporaries, Minoan art is characterized by an astonishing naturalism and vitality. Frescoes depicting graceful dolphins leaping through turquoise waters, slender youths engaged in daring bull-leaping rituals, or elegant women with elaborate coiffures and richly embroidered garments adorned the palace walls. These aren't static, formal portraits. They are snapshots of life, movement, and a deep appreciation for the natural world. Their pottery, from the intricate, thin-walled kamars, where with its polychrome designs to the later marine-style vases adorned with octopi and delicate shells, exemplifies a playful creativity and technical mastery. Gold jewelry, exquisite seal stones carved with miniature scenes, and small, expressive figurines further underscore a society that valued beauty, ritual, and perhaps a connection to the cycles of nature. This artistic effervescence was fueled by and intricately linked to their remarkable maritime prowess. The Minoans were the undisputed masters of the Aegean, effectively holding a thalassocracy or sea power empire. Their advanced shipbuilding techniques and navigational skills allowed them to establish a vast trading network that stretched from Egypt and the Levant to Anatolia and the Greek mainland. Minoan ships, swift and capacious, carried timber, olive oil, wine, and pottery abroad, returning with tin, copper, gold, ivory, and exotic goods, materials essential for their Bronze Age economy and luxury crafts. This exchange was not merely commercial. It was a conduit for cultural diffusion, allowing Minoan ideas and aesthetics to influence surrounding cultures, while also absorbing new inspirations. Their lack of defensive fortifications on land suggests that their navy was their ultimate protector, guarding their wealth and ensuring their prosperity. Beyond the visible grandeur, the Minoans remain veiled in certain mysteries. Their primary writing system, Linear A, remains largely undeciphered, offering only tantalizing glimpses into their language and administrative practices. Their religion, while clearly important, is understood mainly through artistic depictions. The recurring motif of the mother goddess, the significance of the bull, and the ceremonial bull-leaping spectacle. These elements suggest a deep connection to fertility, nature, and ritual, perhaps led by a priestly class rather than a warrior elite. The golden age of the Minoans, however, was not destined to last forever. Around 1450 BCE, a catastrophic event, most likely the massive eruption of the Thera volcano, modern-day Santorini, delivered a devastating blow. The subsequent tsunamis and ashfall would have crippled their naval infrastructure, agriculture, and trade networks. This environmental catastrophe, combined with growing incursions and eventual conquest by the more militaristic Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, led to the swift decline of the independent Minoan civilization. Yet, even in their fall, they left an indelible mark. Their artistic motifs, architectural innovations, and perhaps even some religious practices were absorbed by their conquerors, becoming foundational elements of later Greek culture. The stories of Minos, the labyrinth, and the bull, though reshaped by later Greek sensibilities, kept the memory of Crete's Bronze Age splendor alive, reminding us of a truly sophisticated and vibrant civilization that flourished amidst the waves. Bronze and blades, the age of Mycenaean lords. As the sun began to set on Minoan Crete, a new power was ascendant on the Greek mainland, forged in bronze and driven by a martial spirit, the Mycenaean civilization. Flourishing from approximately 1600 to 1100 BCE. This era marked a significant shift in the Aegean landscape. Gone were the open, elegant palaces of the Minoans. In their place rose formidable citadels, perched atop strategic hills, their cyclopean walls, so massive that later Greeks believed only giants could have built them, proclaiming the might of powerful warrior kings. These were the true lords of the Bronze Age Aegean, a society whose legacy echoes in the epic tales of heroes like Agamemnon and Achilles, their very names synonymous with strength, conflict, and the dawn of a heroic age. At the heart of Mycenaean power were their magnificent palace fortresses, scattered across the Peloponnese and beyond. Mycenae itself, with its iconic lion gate guarding the entrance to a majestic pathway leading to the palace, stands as the quintessential example. Other significant centers included Tiryns, Pylos, Orchomenos, Thebes, and Gla, each a testament to a highly centralized and hierarchical society. Unlike the more diffuse Minoan centers, Mycenaean palaces were clearly fortified, reflecting a world where military strength and defense were paramount. Within their massive walls, the palaces functioned similarly to their Minoan predecessors as administrative, economic, and political hubs, but with a distinct emphasis on military organization and control. Workshops produced weapons and armor alongside pottery and textiles, and vast storage facilities managed the wealth extracted from a populace organized under strict oversight. The Mycenaean economy was profoundly integrated and managed from the palaces. Surviving administrative tablets, written in a script known as Linear B, reveal an incredibly detailed bureaucratic system. Linear B, a syllabic script adapted from the Minoan Linear A, was primarily used for inventory, accounting, and recording tribute. These clay tablets, preserved by the fires that eventually destroyed the palaces, offer an invaluable, albeit incomplete, glimpse into their daily lives. Records of grain, olive oil, wool, livestock, and raw materials. Lists of craftsmen, priests, and military personnel. Even details about land tenure and naval supplies. This sophisticated record-keeping underlines the centralized control exercised by the Wanax, the Mycenaean king or paramount ruler, over every aspect of his realm, from agricultural output to the allocation of resources for warfare. Indeed, warfare appears to have been central to Mycenaean identity and power. Archaeological excavations have unearthed a wealth of weaponry. Magnificent bronze swords, daggers, spears, and elaborate body armor, including the Dendra panoply, a full suit of bronze plate armor. Rich shaft graves at Mycenae, predating the main palace period, contained astounding hoards of gold death masks, intricate jewelry, and inlaid bronze daggers, all indicative of a wealthy warrior elite. Chariots, depicted in frescoes and mentioned in Linear B tablets, were likely used as mobile platforms for archers and spearmen, adding another dimension to their military might. The very architecture of their citadels, with their heavily fortified entrances and commanding views, speaks volumes about a society constantly prepared for conflict, both internal and external. While their art shared some stylistic connections with the Minoans, it developed its own distinct character, often reflecting their more martial worldview. Frescoes depicted battle scenes, processions of warriors, and hunting expeditions, starkly contrasting with the peaceful, naturalistic scenes of Minoan art. Pottery often featured abstract geometric patterns or stylized human and animal figures. However, they also absorbed and adapted many Minoan artistic and religious elements, particularly after their presumed conquest of Crete around 1450 BCE. This cultural exchange is evident in some shared religious symbols and architectural features, even as the Mycenaeans molded them to their own societal structures. The Mycenaean era reached its zenith during the Late Bronze Age, marked by extensive trade networks that stretched across the Mediterranean. Mycenaean pottery has been found in Egypt, the Levant, Anatolia, and even as far west as Italy, indicating a robust commercial presence. They were also active participants in the international diplomacy of the time, as evidenced by references to Ahiawa, likely Mycenaean Greece, in Hittite texts suggesting interaction and sometimes conflict with other great powers of the Bronze Age world. However, around 1200 BCE, the Mycenaean civilization, along with many other Bronze Age powers across the eastern Mediterranean, entered a period of rapid and catastrophic collapse. The causes of this Bronze Age collapse are complex and still debated by historians, but likely included a combination of factors: widespread internal strife and rebellions, invasions by sea peoples, climate change leading to droughts and famine, and the disruption of crucial trade routes that supplied vital materials like tin for bronze production. One by one, the grand palaces were destroyed, burned, and abandoned, ushering in a period of decline and depopulation known as the Greek Dark Ages. Yet, their formidable legacy, particularly their language as preserved in Linear B and their epic tales of heroes and ancient wars, laid the foundation for the later flourishing of classical Greek civilization. Echoes in the silence, the Greek Dark Ages. As the fires that consumed the mighty Mycenaean citadels flickered and died, mainland Greece plunged into a period of profound discontinuity and regression known to historians as the Greek Dark Ages. Spanning roughly from 1100 to 800 BCE, this era stands in stark contrast to the preceding Bronze Age opulence and the vibrant reawakening of the Archaic period that would follow. It was a time of societal collapse, widespread depopulation, the cessation of long-distance trade, and the almost complete disappearance of literacy. Yet, within this silence, the seeds of a new social and political order were quietly germinating, laying the groundwork for the unique developments of classical Greek civilization. The term Dark Ages itself speaks volumes. Archaeological evidence from this period is strikingly sparse compared to the rich finds of the Mycenaean era. Major population centers, once teeming with life and administrative activity, were largely abandoned. The sophisticated palace economies, which had orchestrated production and trade, vanished entirely. With them went the complex bureaucracy that utilized Linear B, and consequently literacy itself disappeared for several centuries. Bronze, a vital material that required extensive trade networks for its tin component, became scarce, forcing a reluctant transition to iron, a metal more abundant locally, but initially harder to work and less durable than high-quality bronze. This material shift, from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, is a defining characteristic of this transformative period. The reasons for this widespread collapse are complex and remain a subject of intense scholarly debate. As noted previously, a confluence of factors likely played a role in the demise of the Mycenaean world. Internal strife, climate change leading to droughts and famine, the disruption of international trade routes, and the incursions of various groups, including the enigmatic Sea Peoples and perhaps migrations of Greek-speaking tribes like the Dorians. Regardless of the exact sequence or primary cause, the outcome was clear: a severe fracturing of political authority and a drastic reduction in population. Communities became isolated, smaller, and largely self-sufficient, focused on basic subsistence rather than grand building projects or long-distance commerce. Life in the Dark Ages was characterized by decentralization. Without the centralizing power of the Wanax and his palace bureaucracy, authority devolved to local chieftains or headmen. These figures, often leading small clans or villages, derived their power from their personal reputation, their skill in warfare, and their ability to protect their community. This social structure, emphasizing a more egalitarian but still hierarchical system of personal loyalty and reciprocal obligations, is often seen as mirroring the heroic age depicted later in Homer's epics, which many scholars believe reflect the oral traditions and social realities of this very period. The lack of monumental architecture and the relatively uniform nature of archaeological finds from this time suggest a society less stratified and less prone to grand expressions of power than its predecessor. Despite the apparent regression, the Dark Ages were not entirely stagnant. Fundamental shifts were occurring that would profoundly shape the future. One of the most significant was the synoikismos, the process of disparate villages and hamlets coalescing into larger, more cohesive communities. Often, these settlements would cluster around a defensible elevated point, which would eventually evolve into the acropolis of the later city-state. This gradual process of aggregation laid the physical and social groundwork for the emergence of the polis, the independent city-state, which would become the hallmark of classical Greek civilization. Furthermore, while literacy vanished, oral traditions thrived. Bards and storytellers continued to recount the tales of the Mycenaean past, the Trojan War, the heroes of Argos and Pylus, preserving a collective memory that would eventually be transcribed. This oral culture was crucial for maintaining a sense of shared heritage and identity, even as political structures fragmented. The period also saw technological adaptations. The mastery of ironworking, initially a necessity due to bronze scarcity, eventually proved transformative, providing a more accessible and ultimately more democratic material for tools and weapons than the rarer and more expensive bronze. Towards the end of the Dark Ages, around 800 BCE, signs of renewed vitality began to appear. Population levels started to rise again, evidenced by an increase in settlement size and number of burials. Contact with the outside world, particularly with the Phoenicians, began to reestablish trade routes and, crucially, introduce the Greeks to the Phoenician alphabet. This adoption of a phonetic script, a far simpler system than the syllabic linear B, would prove revolutionary. It democratized literacy, moving it from the exclusive domain of palace scribes to a more widespread skill, a critical prerequisite for the political and intellectual explosion that was to come. Thus, while shrouded in relative obscurity, the Greek Dark Ages were a crucial crucible. They saw the dramatic end of one highly centralized civilization and the slow, often painful birth of another. It was a period of introspection and realignment, during which the foundational elements of the polis emerged. Oral traditions preserved a heroic past, and new technologies were adopted. The quiet resilience of these centuries of transition ensured that when Greece finally re-emerged into the light, it did so with a fundamentally new social and political structure, poised for an unprecedented period of innovation and cultural flourishing. Cradle of civilization, the emergence of the polis. From the fragmented landscapes and localized existence of the Greek Dark Ages, a new and profoundly influential entity began to coalesce across mainland Greece and the Aegean Islands around the 8th century BCE. The polis. More than just a city, the polis was the independent city-state, a unique and revolutionary form of political, social, and cultural organization that would become the very crucible of classical Greek civilization. Its emergence marked the definitive end of the Dark Ages and the beginning of a vibrant new era, laying the fundamental groundwork for the philosophy, politics, and identity that continue to shape Western thought. The polis was, at its core, a self-governing community of citizens, encompassing both an urban center, Astu, and its surrounding agricultural territory, Kora. While some polis grew into bustling metropolises like Athens and Corinth, many remained relatively small, often just a few thousand citizens strong. Geographically, Greece's rugged, mountainous terrain naturally encouraged the development of numerous isolated, defensible communities, each with its own fertile plains and access to the sea. This physical fragmentation, combined with the process of synoikismos, the gradual consolidation of smaller villages into larger, more cohesive settlements around a central defensible point, often an elevated acropolis, provided the ideal conditions for the polis to take root and flourish. What truly defined the polis was not merely its physical boundaries, but its political and social structure. It fostered an intense sense of collective identity and loyalty among its citizens. Unlike the sprawling empires of the Near East, where subjects owed allegiance to a distant king or emperor, the Greek citizen felt a direct, personal bond with their polis. This communal spirit was reinforced by shared laws, religious cults, and civic festivals. The central public space, the agora, evolved from a marketplace into a focal point for political assembly, social interaction, and philosophical discourse, solidifying the idea of a shared public life. Citizenship, however, was a privileged status, typically reserved for freeborn adult males, while women, slaves, and resident foreigners, metics, were excluded from political participation, highlighting the inherent tensions within this seemingly egalitarian system. The forms of governance that emerged within these independent city-states were remarkably diverse, reflecting a continuous experimentation with political models. Early polis often began with forms of monarchy, albeit usually limited ones. Over time, these often transitioned into oligarchies, where power was concentrated in the hands of a few noble families, the aristoi. In some cases, charismatic strongmen, known as tyrants, seized power, often initially with popular support, challenging the aristocratic elite. Most famously, Athens pioneered direct democracy, where citizens directly participated in decision-making, while Sparta developed a unique militaristic oligarchy, emphasizing strict discipline and collective unity. This political dynamism, born from the independence of each polis, fueled a rich tradition of political thought and debate. Central to the development of the polis was the emergence of the citizen soldier, the hoplite. The hoplite phalanx, a tightly packed formation of heavily armed infantrymen, became the dominant military force. This new mode of warfare had profound social and political implications. The success of the phalanx relied on the unity and discipline of its individual members, each citizen fighting side by side with his peers. This shared experience of defense and collective responsibility fostered a sense of civic equality and strengthened the demand for political participation. If one was willing to risk one's life for the polis, surely one had a right to a say in its governance. The hoplite ethic thus became inextricably linked with the concept of citizenship and civic virtue. Economically, the polis was largely self-sufficient, centered around agricultural production, primarily grain, olives, and grapes. The control of land was paramount, and economic prosperity often led to population growth, which in turn spurred new developments. The revival of long-distance trade, often facilitated by the Phoenicians and later taken up by Greek mariners, allowed polis to specialize in certain crafts or products, fostering wealth and expanding horizons. The reintroduction of literacy, this time using the more adaptable Phoenician alphabet, which the Greeks modified to include vowels, was a watershed moment. It allowed for written laws, administrative records, and eventually, the flourishing of literature, philosophy, and historical narratives, further solidifying the polis as an intellectual hub. The independence of each polis, while a source of innovation and unique identity, also led to perpetual rivalries and frequent interstate warfare. The balance of power was constantly shifting, and alliances were fluid. Yet, this competition wasn't solely destructive. It also manifested in cultural contests, such as the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics, where athletes from different polis competed under a shared Hellenic identity, or in the intellectual and artistic brilliance that flourished in distinct civic environments. In essence, the polis was more than just a place. It was an idea, a vision of a self-contained, self-governing community where citizens shared a common destiny and actively participated in its affairs. It was within the confines of these vibrant city-states that the foundations of Western philosophy, democracy, drama, history, and scientific inquiry were laid, creating a legacy that would reverberate through millennia. The polis, born from the quietude of the Dark Ages, became the resounding echo of Greek ingenuity and the enduring symbol of their quest for collective self-determination. Voices from the dawn, the enduring power of the Homeric epics. As the polis began to take shape from the quietude of the Dark Ages, a new voice, or rather, an echo from a dimly remembered past, began to resonate across the nascent Greek world. This voice belonged to Homer, the legendary poet to whom are attributed the two foundational works of Western literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Composed around the 8th century BCE, precisely as Greece was re-emerging from its long silence, these epic poems did more than merely tell stories. They provided a unifying narrative, shaped the very understanding of heroism, morality, and the divine, and offered a profound lens through which the Greeks would come to view themselves and their place in the cosmos. The origin of these monumental works is shrouded in the mists of oral tradition. For centuries during the Dark Ages, bards would have chanted tales of a grand, bygone era, the age of Mycenaean kings and legendary warriors, passing down stories of the Trojan War and the long voyages home. Homer, whether a single genius or a collective representation of skilled poets, masterfully synthesized and monumentalized these scattered narratives into cohesive, magnificent poems. He stood at a pivotal juncture, looking back to a heroic Bronze Age world, while simultaneously speaking to the emerging values and concerns of the polis era. The Homeric question concerning his identity and the exact nature of the poem's composition remains a fascinating scholarly pursuit, but the impact of the works themselves is beyond dispute. The Iliad, a poem of immense psychological depth and martial grandeur, plunges into the furious climax of the Trojan War. Its central theme is the wrath of Achilles and its devastating consequences. Far from a simple chronicle of battles, it is a nuanced exploration of human nature under duress. The corrosive power of pride, the sorrow of loss, the relentless demands of honor, Clio's undying glory, and the fleeting nature of life. We encounter a pantheon of gods, Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, who are not distant, omnipotent beings, but rather temperamental, anthropomorphic deities deeply entangled in human affairs, often reflecting humanity's own flaws and virtues. The Iliad presents a world defined by the pursuit of heroic glory, even at the cost of unimaginable suffering, questioning the very nature of bravery, sacrifice, and the often grim reality of war. It teaches that even the mightiest warriors are subject to fate and the whims of the gods, yet their choices within those constraints define their legacy. In contrast, the Odyssey offers a journey of return and resilience. It follows the ingenious hero Odysseus on his arduous 10-year voyage home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. This epic is a celebration of cunning, métis, perseverance, and the profound human yearning for home, nostos. Odysseus navigates monstrous encounters, seductive enchantresses, and divine wrath, all while grappling with the challenge of reclaiming his kingdom and family. Where the Iliad is a story of conflict and public glory, the Odyssey delves into the personal trials of survival, the complexities of identity, and the re-establishment of order within the domestic sphere. It explores themes of disguise, recognition, loyalty, and the wisdom gained through hardship, offering a counterpoint to the battlefield valor of the Iliad by emphasizing the different kinds of strength required to endure and rebuild. The impact of these epics on nascent Greek society was immediate and profound. They quickly became the bedrock of Greek education, memorized and recited by generations. Children learned not only language and rhetoric from Homer, but also moral lessons, historical knowledge, as they understood it, and a shared understanding of their ancestral past. The heroes, with all their virtues and vices, served as archetypes, models for emulation or cautionary tales. They provided a common cultural touchstone, helping to forge a sense of Panhellenic identity among the disparate and often warring polis. Despite their political independence, Greeks from Athens to Sparta, Corinth to Syracuse, could unite in their shared reverence for Homeric heroes and the myths they embodied. Beyond education, the epics deeply shaped Greek religion and ethics. They formalized the stories and characteristics of the Olympian gods, cementing their roles and relationships, even as philosophers would later question their morality. They provided a framework for understanding human interaction with the divine, emphasizing piety, proper ritual, and the concept of divine justice. Ethically, they explored concepts of justice, hospitality, xenia, courage, and the importance of fulfilling one's obligations. The characters, both human and divine, grappled with choices that illuminated the complexities of human morality. Furthermore, Homer laid the groundwork for all subsequent Greek literature. The dramatic conflicts, character development, and narrative techniques found in the Iliad and Odyssey profoundly influenced the emergence of Greek tragedy, comedy, and history. Historians like Herodotus and Thucydides, and philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, constantly engaged with Homer's ideas, either building upon them or reacting against them. The themes of human agency versus fate, the nature of a just society, and the pursuit of excellence were first articulated with such power in the epics, becoming perennial questions for Greek thought. Even today, millennia later, the Homeric epics continue to resonate. They are not merely historical artifacts but living texts that speak to universal human experiences. Love and loss, war and peace, journey and homecoming, pride and humility. They stand as magnificent testaments to the power of storytelling and the enduring human quest for meaning, reminding us that the voices from the dawn of Greek civilization continue to illuminate our own. Seeds on distant shores, the great age of Greek colonization. As the Greek polis found their footing after the silence of the Dark Ages, a new kind of restlessness stirred within their vibrant, burgeoning communities. From approximately the 8th to the 6th century BCE, the mainland and islands witnessed an extraordinary phenomenon. A massive, widespread movement of Greek city-states sending out expeditions to establish new settlements across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean and Black Sea. This was not a military conquest driven by empire building in the traditional sense, but a more organic, dynamic expansion, a vital outpouring of Greek culture, trade, and political models that would fundamentally reshape the ancient world. The motivations behind this great wave of colonization were multifaceted, born from a complex interplay of push and pull factors. Perhaps the most pressing push was demographic. Following the Dark Ages, the Greek population began to recover and grow rapidly. This burgeoning populace soon outstripped the limited arable land available within the confines of individual polis, especially in rocky, mountainous Greece. Land scarcity led to social and economic pressure, pushing many, particularly younger sons or those without inherited property, to seek opportunities elsewhere. Closely related was the issue of political instability. Many polis during this period were grappling with internal tensions between the entrenched aristocracy and the rising merchant class or discontented small farmers. Colonization offered a convenient safety valve, a way to export disgruntled or surplus citizens and thereby alleviate social strife without resorting to outright civil war. The pull factors were equally compelling. The lure of new trade routes and access to vital resources was immense. As the Greek world re-engaged with the wider Mediterranean, the demand for metals, especially tin and copper for bronze, timber, and new agricultural land grew. Establishing colonies provided direct access to these resources and opened up new markets for Greek pottery, olive oil, and wine. Furthermore, the spirit of adventure and the promise of a fresh start in an unfamiliar land, free from the strictures of the mother city, undoubtedly appealed to many. The process of establishing a colony, apoikia, was a carefully orchestrated affair, typically initiated and sanctioned by the metropolis or mother city. Before an expedition set out, religious rituals were performed, and the oracle at Delphi was often consulted to seek divine approval and guidance on the most auspicious location. A designated founder, oikistes, usually a prominent citizen, was chosen to lead the venture. He was responsible for selecting the site, ideally defensible, with a good harbor and fertile land, overseeing the initial construction and allocating land to the new settlers. The oikis often became the first leader or hero of the new colony, sometimes even receiving heroic honors after his death. The colonists themselves were typically a diverse group: landless citizens, younger sons, adventurers, and sometimes even those exiled for political reasons. They carried with them sacred fire from the Prytanean, public hearth of their mother city, symbolizing the continuity of their shared heritage. These colonies were not mere outposts. They were independent polis in their own right, sharing cultural and religious ties with their mother city but politically autonomous. They adopted similar forms of governance, built temples to the same gods, and often replicated the civic institutions of their metropolis. This independence, however, did not preclude strong bonds of kinship and mutual support. Trade links remained robust, and mother cities often offered aid to their colonies in times of trouble, and vice versa. Sometimes, colonies even went on to found their own daughter colonies, extending the network further. The geographical reach of this colonization was astounding. Greek settlements blossomed across the coasts of Magna Graecia, southern Italy, and Sicily, where cities like Syracuse, Sybaris, and Croton became powerful and wealthy. Along the Adriatic and Ionian seas, colonies like Epidamnus and Apollonia were founded. To the north, the Chalcidice Peninsula and the coasts of Thrace and Macedonia became dotted with Greek cities, accessing valuable timber and silver. Crucially, the Black Sea, known to the Greeks as the Pontus Euxinus, hospitable sea, saw a proliferation of colonies such as Byzantium, Sinope, and Olbia, granting access to rich grain-producing lands and fishing grounds. Even as far west as present-day France, Massalia, modern Marseille, was founded, and in the east, settlements stretched to Naucratis in Egypt. The impact of this colonization was transformative, both for the Greeks and for the wider ancient world. For the Greeks, it was a period of immense economic growth and cultural diffusion. Trade expanded exponentially, leading to increased wealth, the emergence of a powerful merchant class, and the greater availability of diverse goods. The cultural landscape of the Mediterranean was Hellenized. Greek language, pottery, architecture, and political ideas spread far and wide. influencing indigenous populations. This interaction with other cultures, Phoenicians, Etruscans, Egyptians, native Italians, and Scythians, was a two-way street. The Greeks adopted new technologies, artistic motifs, and ideas from these interactions, notably the alphabet from the Phoenicians, which they adapted and refined. Perhaps most significantly, colonization helped to solidify the concept of Greekness. While politically independent, the scattered colonies maintained a shared sense of Hellenic identity, distinguished from the barbarian, non-Greek-speaking peoples around them. This shared identity was reinforced by common language, religion, and participation in pan-Hellenic festivals like the Olympic Games. The experience of living among non-Greeks often sharpened their sense of distinctiveness. In essence, Greek colonization was not merely a territorial expansion but a vital phase of cultural evolution. It dispersed Greek genius across a vast maritime empire, fostering prosperity, diversifying political experimentation, and profoundly influencing the civilizations it encountered. It set the stage for the dramatic conflicts and unparalleled achievements of the classical age, creating a pan-Hellenic world that, despite its internal divisions, recognized a profound kinship woven from shared language, gods, and the memory of their mother cities. The birth of the people's rule, early democracy in Athens. While the polis emerged as the defining unit of Greek civilization and the Olympic Games forged a shared cultural identity, within the burgeoning city-states themselves, profound internal struggles were shaping their political destinies. Nowhere was this more evident or more revolutionary than in Athens. From the entrenched power of an aristocratic elite and the growing desperation of its populace, a radical new idea began to take root and flourish in the 6th century BCE: democracy. The reforms spearheaded by visionary figures like Solon and Cleisthenes progressively laid the intricate groundwork for what would become the world's first direct democracy, an experiment in self-governance that continues to inspire and challenge us millennia later. At the dawn of the 6th century BCE, Athens was a polis simmering with discontent. Power was concentrated in the hands of the Eupatridae, well-born, a landed aristocracy who held virtually all political offices, including the 9 archons, chief magistrates, and membership in the powerful council of the Areopagus. Economic inequality was rampant. Small farmers, struggling with poor harvests and the inherent risks of agriculture, were increasingly forced to borrow from wealthy landowners, often offering their land and even their persons as security. This debt bondage system, leading to widespread debt slavery and the displacement of citizens, was creating an explosive social crisis, threatening the very stability of the Athenian state. It was into this volatile environment that Solon, a revered Athenian statesman and poet, was appointed as archon with extraordinary powers in 594 BCE. His mission was to mediate the escalating class conflict. Solon's reforms, though not fully democratic, were revolutionary for their time and profoundly transformative. His most immediate and impactful act was the Sysaxia, shaking off of burdens, which canceled all outstanding debts that had led to debt slavery and prohibited future loans secured by a person's body. This single stroke liberated countless Athenians, effectively ending the practice of debt slavery within Attica and preventing a full-scale civil war. Beyond debt relief, Solon restructured Athenian society based on wealth, not birthright. He divided citizens into 4 income classes based on their agricultural output, assigning political rights and military obligations according to their financial standing. While the highest offices remained accessible primarily to the wealthiest, this system, known as a timocracy, fundamentally shifted the basis of political power from inherited status to economic contribution, opening avenues for non-aristocrats to eventually gain influence. Solon also established the Hiliaea, a popular assembly acting as a court of appeal, giving ordinary citizens a voice in legal matters. He created the Bull of 400 Council of 400, drawn from the top 3 wealth classes, to prepare business for the ecclesia, the assembly of all citizens. Solon's reforms aimed at eunomia, good order, and well-governed society, laying a crucial foundation for broader political participation and establishing the principle of law as supreme. Solon's reforms, while progressive, did not immediately usher in democracy. The period following his archonship saw further factionalism, culminating in the rise of the tyrant Pisistratus and his sons. While Pisistratus's rule, c. 561 to 527 BCE, with interruptions, brought stability, prosperity, and cultural flourishing to Athens, it was still an autocratic system. The eventual overthrow of his son Hippias in 510 BCE, with Spartan assistance, created a power vacuum and a renewed opportunity for radical political change. This opportunity was seized by Cleisthenes, an aristocratic reformer, in 508/507 BCE. Often hailed as the father of Athenian democracy, Cleisthenes engineered reforms that fundamentally reconfigured the Athenian state, breaking the last vestiges of aristocratic power based on regional loyalties and creating a truly inclusive civic identity. His genius lay in his administrative reorganization of the citizen body. He dismantled the old tribal system based on aristocratic clans and replaced it with a revolutionary territorial structure. Cleisthenes divided Attica, the region around Athens, into 139 demes, villages or neighborhoods, which became the fundamental units of citizen registration. Each citizen was now identified by his demi, rather than his father's name, fostering a new, shared civic identity. These demes were then grouped into 30 trides, thirds, 10 each from the city, the coast, and the inland regions. Finally, he created 10 new tribes, phylae, each comprising one trides from the city, one from the coast, and one from the inland. This ingenious design ensured that each tribe was geographically diverse, deliberately disrupting the old aristocratic power bases tied to specific regions and forcing citizens from different backgrounds to cooperate within their new tribal affiliations. The new tribal system underpinned the central institutions of the budding democracy. The Boule Council was expanded to 500 members, with 50 drawn by lot from each of the 10 tribes, serving for a year. This council became the administrative heart of the Athenian democracy, preparing legislation for the assembly, ecclesia, managing finances, and overseeing officials. Crucially, the Boule was selected by lot, a mechanism designed to prevent any single faction or individual from dominating and to ensure broad citizen participation. All male citizens over 18 were eligible to attend and speak in the ecclesia, the sovereign legislative body, which met frequently on the Nix Hill to debate and vote on laws, declare war, and elect certain officials. Cleisthenes also introduced ostracism, a unique democratic safety valve allowing citizens to exile, by popular vote, any individual deemed a threat to the democracy for a period of 10 years. Cleisthenes' reforms fundamentally shifted power from birth and wealth to the concept of citizenship, emphasizing isonomia, equality before the law, and isogoria, equality of speech in the assembly. While Athenian democracy was revolutionary, it was not universal. It rigorously excluded women, slaves, who formed a significant portion of the population, and metics, resident foreigners, from political participation. The groundwork laid by Solon, preventing a social explosion and introducing the rule of law, and the radical restructuring by Cleisthenes, empowering the citizen body and breaking aristocratic control, created a unique political laboratory. This brave experiment in self-governance, born from crisis and shaped by visionary reforms, became the defining characteristic of Athens and the crucible in which the intellectual and cultural brilliance of its golden age would fully ignite. The ideals of popular sovereignty and civic participation, forged in the Athenian agora, would resonate through history, profoundly influencing subsequent political thought and democratic aspirations around the world. Whispers of rebellion, the Ionian Revolt, catalyst of conflict. As the Greek polis flourished and Athens painstakingly forged its unique democratic identity, a colossal shadow began to lengthen from the east. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, a vast and burgeoning power that stretched from the Indus Valley to Egypt, had, by the mid-6th century BCE, absorbed the Greek city-states along the western coast of Asia Minor, known as Ionia. These Ionian Greeks, inheritors of a rich cultural tradition that included figures like Homer and early philosophers, found themselves under the yoke of an alien empire, ruled by appointed tyrants loyal to the Persian king. Their simmering resentment would eventually erupt in a rebellion that, while ultimately crushed, served as the unexpected fuse that ignited the monumental conflict between East and West. The Ionian Revolt, 499 to 493 BCE. The roots of the Ionian Revolt lay in a complex tapestry of grievances. While Persian rule was not inherently oppressive in every aspect, they allowed a degree of local autonomy and facilitated trade. The Ionian Greeks chafed under foreign domination. Crucially, the Persians imposed local tyrants, often Greek themselves, to govern the cities, replacing the nascent democratic or oligarchic systems that were beginning to take hold in mainland Greece. These tyrants, beholden to the satrap, Persian provincial governor, rather than their own citizens, were seen as illegitimate instruments of a distant power. Furthermore, economic policies, such as the rerouting of trade or the imposition of tribute, could disrupt the prosperity of mercantile cities like Miletus, a prominent Ionian polis. The very essence of Greek identity, rooted in the independence of the polis and the concept of eleutheria, freedom, clashed fundamentally with the hierarchical, imperial model of Persia. The immediate catalyst for the revolt was Aristagoras, the tyrant of Miletus. In 500 BCE, he convinced the Persian satrap Artaphernes to launch a joint expedition against the island of Naxos. The expedition, however, proved a humiliating failure, largely due to internal squabbles and the treachery of Aristagoras himself. Fearing retribution from Persia for his incompetence, and perhaps seeing an opportunity to consolidate his own power by embracing the popular sentiment for freedom, Aristagoras made a drastic gamble. He renounced his tyranny, declared Miletus a free city, and incited a general revolt among the Ionian Greek cities against Persian rule. The rebellion spread quickly, fueled by the widespread desire for self-determination. Aristagoras understood that the Ionian Greeks alone could not stand against the might of the Persian Empire. He desperately sought assistance from mainland Greece, appealing to Sparta and, perhaps more surprisingly, to Athens. Sparta, a land-based power focused on its Peloponnesian hegemony, famously rejected his plea after King Cleomenes I balked at the vast distance to Susa, the Persian capital. Athens, however, with its newly established democracy and its own growing naval power, was more receptive. They dispatched 20 ships, a relatively small but symbolically significant force. Eretria, another polis on the island of Euboea, also contributed 5 ships. This seemingly minor act of assistance would have colossal repercussions, forever altering the course of Greek history. The early phase of the revolt saw some dramatic successes. In 498 BCE, the combined Ionian, Athenian, and Eretrian forces launched a daring raid on Sardis, the capital of the Persian satrapy of Lydia. While they failed to capture the citadel, they succeeded in burning much of the city, including the Temple of Cybele. This act of sacrilege, particularly the burning of a Persian temple, deeply enraged King Darius I and ensured that Persia would view the Athenians as hostile actors. Herodotus recounts Darius's vow of vengeance, famously ordering a servant to remind him 3 times a day, "Master, remember the Athenians." However, the tide soon turned. The Persian response was systematic and overwhelming. Darius mobilized vast land and naval forces to suppress the rebellion. The initial Greek successes were followed by devastating defeats. The Athenians, recognizing the overwhelming power of Persia, withdrew their fleet after the Sardis raid, leaving the Ionians largely to their own devices. This withdrawal, though pragmatic, would later be viewed as a betrayal by some Ionians. Despite pockets of fierce resistance and notable naval battles, the sheer scale and organization of the Persian military machine proved too much for the disparate and often uncoordinated Ionian forces. The decisive moment came in 494 BCE with the Battle of Lade. The Ionian fleet, despite its considerable size, was plagued by desertions and internal divisions. Faced with a superior Persian navy, many Ionian contingents broke ranks, leading to a crushing defeat for the rebels. With their naval power broken, Miletus, the heart of the revolt, was besieged, captured, and utterly devastated by the Persians. Its male population was slaughtered or enslaved, and its inhabitants deported to Mesopotamia. Other rebellious cities suffered similar fates, though often less brutally. By 493 BCE, the Ionian revolt was effectively over. The Ionian revolt, though a military failure for the Greeks, had profound and unforeseen consequences. Most immediately, it directly provoked the Persian Wars. Darius, incensed by the Ionian rebellion and particularly by the involvement of Athens and Eretria, saw the mainland Greeks as a persistent threat that needed to be neutralized. The burning of Sardis was an unforgivable affront that demanded retribution. The Ionian revolt thus shifted Persia's gaze westward from mere provincial management to a full-scale punitive expedition against the Greek mainland. Beyond this immediate cause and effect, the revolt forced the Greeks to confront the overwhelming power of the Persian Empire. It provided valuable lessons, albeit harsh ones, about the need for greater unity and strategic planning in the face of such a formidable enemy. While the Ionians suffered, their resistance also revealed the inherent weaknesses of an empire that relied on local tyrants and lacked the deep civic loyalty that defined the Greek polis. It sharpened the distinction between the free Greeks of the mainland and their enslaved Ionian brethren, fueling the rhetoric of liberty versus tyranny that would become a central theme of the Persian Wars. The echoes of the Ionian struggle for freedom would resonate deeply in the minds of Athenians and other Greeks as they prepared to face the next, far greater, Persian invasion. The stage was set for a clash of civilizations that would define an era. The Shield of Attica, the Battle of Marathon. The flames that consumed Sardis, fanned by Athenian and Eretrian intervention during the Ionian revolt, had not gone unnoticed in the grand halls of the Persian Empire. King Darius I, master of the known world, viewed this audacious act by distant city-states as an intolerable insult, a direct challenge to his divine authority, and a dangerous precedent that could destabilize his vast dominion. His vow of retribution was absolute. Athens and Eretria would pay dearly. Thus, in the summer of 490 BCE, a formidable Persian expeditionary force, led by the experienced generals Datis and Artaphernes, set sail across the Aegean with a clear objective: to punish the recalcitrant Greeks and bring their rebellious spirit to heel. The Persian fleet, a mighty armada of perhaps 600 ships carrying tens of thousands of soldiers, first descended upon Eretria on the island of Euboea. After a siege, the city fell, its population enslaved and its temples burned in a brutal demonstration of Persian might. The message was clear. Next on the list was Athens, the primary instigator of the Ionian affront and a burgeoning democratic power that represented an ideological challenge to Persian authoritarianism. The Persian commanders chose the Bay of Marathon, a coastal plain approximately 42 kilometers northeast of Athens, as their landing site. It offered ample space for their cavalry, a key strength of the Persian army, and a direct route to the Athenian capital. News of the Persian landing sent a wave of terror and urgency through Athens. Their nascent democracy faced its first true existential threat. The ecclesia, the Athenian assembly, made the brave and audacious decision to confront the invaders on the plain of Marathon rather than retreating behind their city walls, recognizing the tactical advantages of the terrain and the psychological impact of a direct engagement. A desperate plea for aid was dispatched to Sparta, the preeminent military power in Greece, via the swift runner Phidippides. However, bound by religious custom, the Spartans declared they could not march until the full moon, leaving Athens to face the Persian juggernaut with only the assistance of a small contingent, around 1,000 men, from their steadfast ally Plataea. The Athenian force, numbering approximately 10,000 hoplites under the overall command of Callimachus and guided by the strategic genius of the veteran general Miltiades, took up a position blocking the exits from the Marathon plain. For several days, the two armies stood in a tense standoff. Miltiades understood the immense numerical superiority of the Persians and the devastating potential of their cavalry. He also knew that the tightly packed Athenian hoplite phalanx, with its heavy armor, long spears, and collective discipline, was their greatest strength, particularly in close-quarters combat. The challenge was how to negate the Persian cavalry and archers in the open plain. Miltiades devised an unconventional and brilliant strategy. He thinned out the Athenian battle line in the center to match the length of the Persian front, preventing an immediate encirclement. Crucially, he significantly strengthened the wings of his phalanx. This seemingly counterintuitive formation was designed to draw the Persian attack into the center, where the Greek line, though thinner, would hold, while the heavily reinforced wings would rapidly advance and envelop the enemy's flanks. The Athenians also chose their moment to attack carefully, probably charging at dawn, a time when the Persian cavalry was either watering their horses or otherwise preparing for the day, thus minimizing their impact. When the signal was given, the Athenian hoplites, possibly running the last 200 meters to reduce the time spent under Persian arrow fire, charged forward. It was an unprecedented act of aggression against a superior force, terrifying to behold. The Persians, accustomed to their enemies breaking formation before contact, were stunned by the disciplined fury of the Greek charge. As Miltiades had anticipated, the Persian center, composed primarily of their elite immortals, managed to push back the thinned Athenian center. However, the powerful Athenian wings, having routed the lighter Persian infantry on the flanks, then wheeled inwards, turning the Persian advance into a chaotic rout. The heavier, more disciplined hoplite phalanx proved devastatingly effective against the lighter-armed Persian archers and skirmishers once they engaged in hand-to-hand combat. The battle became a desperate struggle for the Persians to escape back to their ships. Thousands were cut down on the plain and in the marshes. The Athenian victory was absolute and decisive. Herodotus records Persian losses at 6,400 dead, while the Athenians lost only 192, a testament to the effectiveness of their strategy and the hoplite phalanx. The legendary run of Phidippides, or perhaps another messenger, from Marathon to Athens, proclaiming Nike, victory, and then collapsing, cemented the battle's place in popular imagination, though the precise details of the run itself are debated. The Battle of Marathon was far more than a military engagement. It was a profound psychological triumph. It was the first time the seemingly invincible Persian Empire had been decisively defeated on European soil by a much smaller, democratic force. For the Athenians, it was an unparalleled source of national pride and an immense boost to morale. It validated their radical democratic experiment, demonstrating that free citizens fighting for their polis could overcome the might of an imperial autocracy. The courage and sacrifice of the Marathon fighters, Marathonomachoi, became a cornerstone of Athenian identity and a powerful symbol of Greek independence. It showed the Greeks that Persia was not invincible, setting the stage for the even greater conflicts that would define the next decade and forever alter the course of Western history. The final blows, Plataea, Mycale, and the retreat of the empire, The crushing defeat of the Persian fleet at Salamis had been a strategic triumph for the Greeks, forcing Xerxes to retreat, but the immediate threat was far from over. A substantial Persian land army, under the command of Xerxes' brother-in-law Mardonius, remained in Greece, wintering in Thessaly. His objective was clear: complete the subjugation of Greece that Xerxes had begun. The spring of 479 BCE brought renewed Persian aggression, as Mardonius reoccupied and again sacked Athens, demonstrating that despite the naval victory, the heart of Attica remained vulnerable. The stage was set for the final, decisive confrontations that would determine the fate of Greece and the future of Western civilization. Mardonius, learning from the mistakes of the previous year, attempted to sow discord among the Hellenic League. He offered Athens a generous peace treaty, promising autonomy, reconstruction of their city, and expansion of their territory, hoping to detach them from the Spartan-led alliance. The Athenians, despite the devastation of their city, famously rejected the offer, reaffirming their commitment to Greek freedom and unity, a testament to the democratic values that were increasingly defining them. This unwavering resolve forced Mardonius to seek a decisive land battle. The combined forces of the Hellenic League, primarily comprising the largest contingents from Sparta, led by Regent Pausanias, Athens, led by Aristides, and Corinth, assembled in the plain of Plataea in Boeotia. This was the largest Greek army ever fielded, estimated at over 100,000 men, including a significant number of hoplites and light-armed troops. Mardonius's Persian army, though reduced from its initial size, still numbered in the tens of thousands, reinforced by Greek Medizers from Thessaly and Boeotia. The two armies engaged in a tense standoff for several days, marked by skirmishes, tactical repositioning, and a battle of wits between the commanders. The Battle of Plataea, fought in August 479 BCE, was a sprawling and chaotic land engagement that ultimately broke Persian power in Greece. Mardonius, confident in his cavalry and archers, repeatedly tried to lure the disciplined Greek hoplites into open ground where their mobility could be exploited. However, the Greek commanders, remembering the lessons of Marathon, maintained strong defensive positions. A series of miscommunications and tactical withdrawals on the Greek side led to a temporary disarray, which Mardonius mistook for a full retreat. He launched a full-scale assault, believing the Greeks were breaking. This proved to be Mardonius's fatal error. The Spartan and Tegean forces, forming the core of the Greek right flank, held firm against the elite Persian infantry. Once engaged in close-quarters combat, the heavy armor, long spears, and rigid discipline of the Greek phalanx proved overwhelmingly superior to the lighter-armed Persian infantry. The sheer power of the hoplite charge broke through the Persian lines. Mardonius himself, fighting bravely at the front, was killed. His death demoralized the Persian army, which rapidly disintegrated into a panicked rout. The battle became a bloody slaughter, with the Greeks relentlessly pursuing the fleeing Persians, particularly those who sought refuge in a fortified camp. The Persian losses were immense, likely tens of thousands, while Greek casualties were comparatively light. Plataea was a decisive and crushing victory for the Hellenic League, effectively ending the Persian land threat to mainland Greece. Remarkably, on the very same day or very close to it, another pivotal engagement took place far to the east, off the coast of Ionia, the Battle of Mycale. The remaining Persian fleet, after its devastating defeat at Salamis, had retreated to the Ionian coast, anchoring its ships at Mycale near Samos and drawing them onto the shore, fortifying them with a land army. The Greek fleet, under the command of the Spartan king Leotychides and the Athenian Xanthippus, father of Pericles, pursued them. Seeing the heavily fortified Persian position, the Greeks disembarked their marines and sailors, effectively turning the naval battle into a land engagement. Inspired by the news, or perhaps a carefully staged rumor, of the victory at Plataea, the Greek forces attacked the Persian camp. The Ionian Greeks, long oppressed by Persian rule and sensing an opportunity for liberation, deserted the Persian lines and joined their Hellenic brethren in the fight. The battle was fierce, but the Greek determination, combined with the defection of the Ionians, led to another overwhelming victory. The remaining Persian fleet was destroyed, and their land forces utterly routed. Mycale effectively liberated the Ionian Greek cities from Persian rule and marked the end of Persian naval power in the Aegean. The twin victories at Plataea and Mycale in 479 BCE represented the culmination of the Persian Wars and definitively secured Greek independence. For the Persian Empire, it was a humiliating and costly setback. While they remained a formidable power for centuries, their grand ambition to conquer Greece had been definitively thwarted. The great kings would never again launch a full-scale invasion of mainland Greece. Instead, the focus of the conflict shifted to a prolonged, low-intensity struggle for control of the Aegean and Ionia. For the Greeks, the impact was monumental. The Persian Wars had been a crucible that forged a stronger, more unified Hellenic identity. The shared experience of defending Eleutheria, freedom, against tyranny became a foundational myth, celebrated in art, literature, and civic pride for generations. The unexpected victory against a seemingly invincible empire instilled an unprecedented sense of confidence and destiny. Crucially, the outcome fundamentally reshaped the balance of power within Greece itself. While Sparta's hoplites had been indispensable at Plataea, it was Athens's naval prowess at Salamis and Mycale that had been decisive in cutting off Persian supply lines and liberating the Ionian Greeks. This direct involvement in the liberation of their fellow Greeks across the Aegean laid the groundwork for Athens to emerge as the dominant naval power in the Greek world. From this newfound prestige and the continuing threat of Persia, Athens would soon establish the Delian League, ostensibly a defensive alliance against Persia, but which would quickly transform into the bedrock of an Athenian empire, ushering in the dazzling yet ultimately fraught Golden Age of Athens and setting the stage for the next great internal conflict among the Greeks themselves. The Golden Dawn, Athens and the birth of empire. With the Persian threat decisively repelled at Plataea and Mycale, the Greeks found themselves masters of their own destiny, free from foreign domination. This victory, however, also heralded a dramatic shift in the internal balance of power within Greece, propelling Athens, the democratic polis that had endured two sacks and provided the decisive naval strength at Salamis, to an unprecedented position of prominence. The stage was now set for Athens to embark on its own imperial project, inadvertently laying the groundwork for its own cultural zenith, the Golden Age, and simultaneously sowing the seeds of its eventual decline. The immediate aftermath of the Persian Wars saw the need for continued vigilance against a potential Persian resurgence. While Xerxes' grand invasion had failed, the empire remained vast and powerful, and many Ionian Greek cities still desired protection. Sparta, the traditional leader of the Hellenic League, was primarily a land power, wary of prolonged expeditions overseas, and focused on maintaining its hegemony in the Peloponnese. Athens, on the other hand, had built and refined the most powerful navy in the Aegean, composed of hundreds of triremes, and its strategic interests naturally extended to the maritime world and the liberation of the Ionian Greeks. In 478 BCE, a year after Plataea and Mycale, the Athenian general Aristides convened a meeting of Greek city-states, particularly those from the Aegean Islands and the Anatolian coast, who sought continued protection from Persia. This assembly led to the formation of the Delian League, an ostensibly voluntary defensive alliance. Its stated purpose was clear: to continue the war against Persia, to exact reparations for the damage inflicted during the invasions, and to liberate any remaining Greek cities under Persian rule. Member states contributed either ships and crews to the League's common fleet or, more commonly, a financial tribute, phoros, to a common treasury, which was initially housed on the sacred island of Delos. Athens, by virtue of its naval supremacy and its commitment to the cause, became the undisputed leader of the League, providing the commanders and the bulk of the fighting force. Over the next 3 decades, the Delian League successfully achieved its stated objectives. Under Athenian leadership, especially through the campaigns of Cimon, Persian garrisons were expelled from the Aegean, and the threat of invasion was effectively neutralized. The decisive victory at the Battle of the Eurymedon River, c. 466 BCE, against a combined Persian land and sea force further solidified Greek control of the Aegean. However, as the Persian threat receded, the nature of the Delian League began to undergo a subtle but profound transformation. Athens increasingly treated the League's members not as autonomous allies, but as subjects. When a member city, weary of contributing tribute, attempted to secede, Athens would swiftly and brutally suppress the rebellion, often imposing democratic constitutions, which favored Athenian interests, and confiscating land for Athenian settlers, clerices. The most symbolic and controversial shift occurred in 454 BCE, when the League's treasury was moved from Delos to Athens, ostensibly for greater security. This move effectively placed the vast wealth of the League directly under Athenian control. It was during this period, particularly under the magnetic and visionary leadership of Pericles, that Athens entered its golden age, roughly 461 to 429 BCE. Pericles, a brilliant orator, strategist, and democratic statesman, dominated Athenian politics for decades, consistently re-elected to the generalship. He famously championed a policy of imperial expansion and democratic radicalism. He argued that the wealth derived from the Delian League was justly earned by Athens for its indispensable protection of its allies and could therefore be used to fund a vast program of public works and civic enhancement, even in peacetime. Under Pericles' ambitious building program, Athens was transformed into a dazzling architectural marvel. The Acropolis, previously devastated by the Persians, was rebuilt with unparalleled magnificence. The construction of the Parthenon, a majestic temple dedicated to Athena Parthenos, designed by Ectinus and Callicrates and adorned with the exquisite sculptures of Phidias, became the crowning achievement of Greek architecture and art. Other monumental structures like the Propylaea, the Erechtheion, and the Temple of Athena Nike rose on the Acropolis, proclaiming the glory and power of Athens. These projects not only showcased Athenian wealth and artistic genius, but also provided employment for thousands of citizens and medics, further cementing the city's economic prosperity. Beyond its architectural splendor, the Golden Age was a period of extraordinary intellectual and cultural flourishing. Athenian democracy reached its zenith, with radical policies like payment for jury duty and public office ensuring even the poorest citizens could participate in governance. This vibrant political environment fostered an explosion of ideas. Philosophy, pioneered by figures like Socrates, began to question traditional beliefs and explore ethical and epistemological questions. Drama, in the hands of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, reached its peak, exploring universal human themes through tragedy. Comedy, personified by Aristophanes, provided biting political and social commentary. History, through the meticulous accounts of Thucydides, evolved into a more analytical and secular discipline. Oratory, rhetoric, and debate were honed into powerful tools of persuasion, vital for life in the agora and assembly. However, this golden brilliance cast a long shadow. The transformation of the Delian League into an Athenian empire, the diversion of allied tribute to Athenian projects, and the increasingly heavy-handed imposition of Athenian will on its allies bred deep resentment. States like Naxos, Thasos, and Samos, who dared to defy Athenian authority, were harshly suppressed, their walls torn down, their fleets confiscated, and often their autonomy curtailed. This perceived tyranny, combined with Athens's growing naval power and commercial ambitions, deeply alarmed Sparta and its allies in the Peloponnesian League. The ideological divide between democratic, imperial Athens and oligarchic, land-based Sparta, long simmering beneath the surface, grew increasingly acute. The very glory of the Athenian Golden Age, fueled by its empire, ironically pushed it closer to the brink of a devastating conflict with its Greek brethren, a conflict that would ultimately bring an end to this unparalleled era of prosperity and innovation. The shadow lengthens, the Peloponnesian War. The dazzling brilliance of the Athenian Golden Age, built upon the foundations of its burgeoning empire, cast an increasingly dark and ominous shadow over the Greek world. While Athens flourished, its assertive naval power, its relentless expansion of influence, and its democratic ideology became deeply unsettling to its rivals, particularly the oligarchic, land-based power of Sparta and its Peloponnesian allies. The peace that had tenuously held since the Persian Wars was increasingly strained, marked by a growing sense of inevitable conflict between the two dominant Greek powers. By 431 BCE, the simmering tensions boiled over, igniting the devastating Peloponnesian War, a conflict that would tear apart the Hellenic world, redefine the nature of warfare, and ultimately bring an end to Athens' golden era. The underlying causes of the war were multifaceted and deeply rooted in the divergent political systems and ambitions of Athens and Sparta. For Sparta and its allies, notably Corinth and Thebes, the primary concern was fear, the escalating fear of Athenian power. Athens' transformation of the Delian League into a coercive empire, its aggressive commercial expansion, and its perceived arrogance threatened the traditional balance of power and Sparta's long-held position as the dominant force on the Greek mainland. The ideological clash was equally profound. Athenian democracy, with its emphasis on individual freedom and naval enterprise, stood in stark contrast to Spartan oligarchy, its rigid discipline, and its land-based military might. This fundamental difference in values made peaceful coexistence increasingly difficult. While these long-term grievances simmered, a series of immediate triggers ignited the conflagration. The first was the dispute over Corcyra, modern Corfu, a strategically vital island with a powerful navy. When Corcyra, an independent state, sought Athenian aid against its mother city, Corinth, a key Spartan ally, Athens provided limited military support, infuriating Corinth. Next came the siege of Potidaea, a Corinthian colony that was also a member of the Athenian Empire. When Potidaea revolted against Athens, Corinth again saw Athenian aggression, and Sparta pledged its support to the rebels. Finally, the Megarian decree, imposed by Athens, effectively banned Megarian, a Spartan ally, merchants from all Athenian and allied ports, crippling their economy. These Athenian actions were interpreted by the Peloponnesian League as clear acts of aggression and economic strangulation, leaving them with a stark choice: fight or concede Athenian hegemony. After much debate, the Peloponnesian League declared war on Athens. The war, meticulously chronicled by the Athenian historian Thucydides, who himself participated and was exiled during the conflict, unfolded in two main phases. The first phase, known as the Archidamian War, 431 to 421 BCE, saw Sparta, under King Archidamus II, repeatedly invade Attica, ravaging the Athenian countryside. Pericles, the visionary Athenian leader, adopted a shrewd defensive strategy. He ordered the entire population of Attica to evacuate their farms and retreat within the formidable long walls that connected Athens to its port of Piraeus. His plan was to avoid a direct land confrontation with the superior Spartan hoplites, relying instead on Athens's impregnable fortifications and its unrivaled naval power to import food and conduct raids on Peloponnesian coastal territories. This strategy, while militarily sound, had a devastating, unforeseen consequence. The overcrowding within the city walls led to a catastrophic plague in 430 BCE, which ravaged Athens, killing a third of its population, including Pericles himself in 429 BCE. The loss of Pericles, with his unique blend of strategic vision and moral authority, was a crushing blow to Athens. Without his steady hand, Athenian leadership became more volatile, often swayed by ambitious demagogues like Cleon. Despite the plague and the Spartan incursions, neither side could gain a decisive advantage, leading to a stalemate that was eventually broken by the signing of the Peace of Nicias in 421 BCE, a temporary truce that aimed to restore the pre-war status quo. However, the peace was fragile and short-lived. Ambitious young leaders on both sides, notably the charismatic but reckless Athenian Alcibiades, pushed for renewed conflict. The second and decisive phase of the war began with the disastrous Sicilian expedition, 415 to 413 BCE. Alcibiades convinced the Athenians to launch a massive naval and military expedition to conquer Syracuse, a wealthy Spartan ally in Sicily, believing it would cripple the Peloponnesian League and provide vast resources for Athens. Despite warnings from more cautious generals like Nicias, the Athenian assembly, swayed by Alcibiades' promises of glory and wealth, committed an enormous force. The expedition proved to be an unmitigated catastrophe for Athens, plagued by poor leadership, tactical blunders, and the superior generalship of the Spartan Gylippus, who reinforced Syracuse. The entire Athenian force was annihilated. Tens of thousands of Athenian soldiers and sailors were killed or captured, and their entire fleet was destroyed. This single defeat was an irreparable blow to Athenian power, stripping them of their most experienced soldiers, sailors, and precious triremes, and severely depleting their treasury. The final years of the war, 413 to 404 BCE, saw Athens struggling desperately to recover. Sparta, now aided financially by Persia, who sought to weaken both Greek powers, and advised by the brilliant general Lysander, finally built a formidable navy. The climactic naval battle of Aegospotami in 405 BCE saw Lysander completely destroy the last remnants of the Athenian fleet. With no navy to protect its supply lines, Athens was blockaded and starved into submission. In 404 BCE, Athens finally surrendered. The terms of defeat were harsh. Athens was forced to dismantle its long walls and its remaining fortifications, surrender its fleet, save for 12 ships, recall its exiles, and effectively become a subordinate ally of Sparta. The Peloponnesian War was a catastrophe for the entire Greek world. It devastated economies, depopulated cities, and exhausted the resources of the warring polis. It ended the Athenian Empire and ushered in a period of Spartan hegemony, which in turn proved short-lived and unpopular. The conflict fostered deep divisions and distrust among the Greeks, making unified action against external threats, like the rising power of Macedon, increasingly difficult. The war also had a profound impact on Greek society, leading to increased political instability, a decline in traditional morality, and a more cynical outlook on politics. The vibrant democratic ideal of Periclean Athens, while not extinguished, was deeply scarred. While Greece would experience further periods of prosperity, the golden age of the independent polis had passed, and the seeds of its eventual subjugation by external powers had been irrevocably sown. The rise of the North, Philip II, and the unification of Greece. The ashes of the Peloponnesian War settled heavily upon Greece, leaving behind a landscape of exhausted polis, fractured alliances, and a pervasive sense of instability. The much-vaunted independence of the Greek city-states had given way to a cycle of shifting hegemonies, Spartan, then Theban, then a brief resurgence of Athenian power, none of which could establish lasting peace or truly unite the Hellenic world. While the southern Greeks squabbled and bled each other dry, a new power was quietly and strategically rising in the north, in the rugged kingdom of Macedon. Its architect was a brilliant and ambitious monarch, Philip II. Macedon, traditionally viewed by the southern Greeks as a semi-barbarian backwater, had long been on the periphery of the Hellenic world. Its people spoke a dialect of Greek, revered Greek gods, and participated in Greek festivals. But their political structure was that of a monarchy, alien to the polis system, and their culture was seen as less refined. Philip II, who ascended to the Macedonian throne in 359 BCE at a time of deep internal crisis for his kingdom, would single-handedly transform this perception and propel Macedon to unprecedented power, ultimately bringing the entire Greek world under its sway. Philip was a genius of both military innovation and shrewd diplomacy. He first set about consolidating his power within Macedon, crushing internal rivals and securing his borders against barbarian incursions. Crucially, he embarked on a radical reform of the Macedonian army. He developed the formidable Macedonian phalanx, a revolutionary infantry formation that surpassed the traditional Greek hoplite phalanx. His phalangites were armed with the sarissa, an enormously long, up to 18 feet, spear, held by two hands, creating an almost impenetrable wall of pikes. This was complemented by highly mobile, heavily armored cavalry, the companion cavalry, and specialized siege engineers. The Macedonian army became a professional, disciplined fighting force, far more flexible and adaptable than anything seen in the Greek world before. With his domestic and military reforms complete, Philip turned his gaze southward. His strategy was a masterful blend of military might, diplomatic maneuvering, and exploitation of Greek disunity. He systematically expanded Macedonian control, first securing the mineral-rich regions of Thrace, which provided vast wealth from gold and silver mines, funding his ambitions. He then began to intervene in Greek affairs, often under the guise of protecting the sacred sites, such as in the Third Sacred War, 356 to 346 BCE, where he championed the Delphic Amphictyony against Phocis. This allowed him to project Macedonian power deeper into central Greece and gain a seat on the Amphictyonic Council, giving him a legitimate voice in Greek religious and political affairs. Philip's expansion was met with a mixed reaction in southern Greece. Some, recognizing the weariness of constant warfare and the superior organization of Macedon, saw him as a potential unifier, a leader who could bring peace and stability. Others, particularly the Athenian orator Demosthenes, viewed him as an existential threat to Greek freedom and independence. Demosthenes delivered a series of impassioned speeches, known as the Philippics, warning his fellow Athenians of Philip's true intentions and urging them to resist Macedonian encroachment at all costs. He rightly identified Philip not as a liberator, but as an encroaching tyrant. Despite Demosthenes' warnings, the southern Greek polis remained fatally divided and unable to present a united front. Their internal rivalries and historical animosities proved stronger than the perceived external threat. They would form temporary alliances against Philip, only for them to dissolve due to suspicion or self-interest. Philip, ever the pragmatist, skillfully exploited these divisions, employing a strategy of divide and conquer, bribery, and targeted military intervention. He would support one city against another, gaining influence, and then expand his control. The decisive moment came in 338 BCE at the Battle of Kyrenia. A coalition of Athenians and Thebans, finally realizing the extent of Philip's ambition, decided to make a stand. Philip's professional Macedonian army, including his young son Alexander leading the companion cavalry, crushed the combined Greek forces. The Macedonian phalanx proved its overwhelming superiority, and the disciplined maneuvers of Philip's army simply outmatched the valiant but less coordinated Greeks. The battle was a resounding and definitive victory for Macedon, effectively ending the era of independent Greek city-states. Following Kyrenia, Philip did not destroy the Greek cities. Instead, he imposed a new order. He established the League of Corinth, a pan-Hellenic alliance, excluding Sparta, which refused to join but was effectively neutralized. While ostensibly a voluntary alliance, it was clearly under Macedonian hegemony. The Greek cities retained a degree of internal autonomy, but their foreign policy was dictated by Philip. He proclaimed himself hegemon leader of the League and announced his grand plan: a united Greek expedition against their ancient common enemy, Persia, ostensibly to avenge their past grievances. Philip's assassination in 336 BCE, under mysterious circumstances, prevented him from leading this grand expedition. However, his legacy was immense and transformative. He had taken a peripheral kingdom and forged it into the dominant power in the Greek world. He had revolutionized military tactics and organization. Most importantly, he had brought an end to the centuries-long era of independent polis, replacing it with a new, unified political structure under Macedonian leadership. He had painstakingly laid the foundations for the most extraordinary military campaign in ancient history, leaving his vast and perfectly honed army and his grand ambition to his brilliant and even more ambitious son, Alexander. The stage was now set for the astonishing eastward expansion that would spread Hellenic culture across 3 continents and usher in the Hellenistic Age. The world under his feet, Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic Dawn. The grand design of Philip II to unite Greece and lead a pan-Hellenic crusade against Persia was tragically cut short by his assassination in 336 BCE. Yet, the foundations he had meticulously laid, a formidable professional army and a unified, though subservient Greek world, were inherited by a young man destined to transcend his father's achievements and carve out an empire of unprecedented scale. Alexander III, the Great. In a mere 13 years, Alexander would sweep across the known world, shattering the Persian Empire, spreading Hellenic culture, and ushering in a new era that reshaped the ancient landscape. Alexander, tutored by none other than Aristotle, possessed a brilliant mind, immense ambition, and an unparalleled understanding of military strategy. His ascension to the throne was not without challenge. Upon Philip's death, many Greek city-states, sensing an opportunity to reclaim their independence, revolted. Alexander, then only 20 years old, responded with chilling speed and brutality. He swiftly crushed the uprising, culminating in the complete destruction of Thebes, a stark warning to any who dared defy Macedonian authority. This decisive action solidified his control over Greece, ensuring that his father's League of Corinth would serve as the launching pad for his grand ambitions. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, leading a combined Macedonian and Greek force of around 40,000 men. His declared aim was to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece, but his personal ambition clearly extended far beyond mere retribution. His campaign was a relentless series of strategic masterstrokes and overwhelming victories. His first major test came at the Battle of the Granicus River, 334 BCE, where he decisively defeated the local Persian satraps, opening up Asia Minor. Next, at the Battle of Issus, 333 BCE, he faced Darius III, the Persian Great King, for the first time. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander's tactical genius and the disciplined might of his phalanx and cavalry broke the Persian line, forcing Darius to flee and abandoning his family to Alexander's mercy. Instead of immediately pursuing Darius, Alexander then shrewdly secured his flank by conquering the coastal regions, including the formidable siege of Tyre, and then moving into Egypt. In Egypt, he was welcomed as a liberator, founded the great city of Alexandria, and was even hailed as a pharaoh and son of Zeus. The climactic confrontation came at the Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BCE, near modern Mosul, Iraq. Here, Darius had gathered the full might of his vast empire, including scythe chariots and war elephants. Alexander, facing overwhelming odds, employed a complex and brilliant maneuver, drawing the Persian center out before striking a decisive blow with his companion cavalry directly at Darius's command unit. Darius fled again, and his empire effectively collapsed. Alexander marched into Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, seizing immense treasures and symbolically burning the royal palace at Persepolis as a final act of revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens. Yet, Alexander's ambition knew no bounds. He continued eastward, conquering Bactria and Sogdiana, modern Afghanistan and Central Asia, enduring fierce resistance and harsh conditions. His army, though loyal, grew increasingly weary, especially when he decided to push into India. Despite a hard-fought victory against King Porus and his elephants at the Hydaspes River, 326 BCE, his exhausted troops finally mutinied, refusing to advance further. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back, leading his army through the brutal Gedrosian Desert, a journey that inflicted severe losses. Alexander's vision was not merely conquest. It was the creation of a vast, integrated empire that blended Hellenic and Persian cultures. He founded numerous cities, many named Alexandria, which served as centers for Greek trade, language, and culture. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, and he incorporated Persian nobles into his administration and army, promoting a policy of fusion that was ahead of its time. He maintained aspects of Persian administration, integrating them into his Macedonian Greek framework. This deliberate policy of cultural synthesis, known as Hellenization, would be one of his most enduring legacies. Greek language, Koine Greek, art, architecture, philosophy, and political ideas spread across vast territories, profoundly influencing the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of India for centuries. Alexander returned to Babylon in 323 BCE, planning future campaigns, but he succumbed to a sudden illness, or perhaps poison, at the age of 32. His death sent shockwaves through his nascent empire. He had left no clear successor, simply proclaiming that his empire should go to the strongest. This vague declaration led to decades of brutal civil wars among his generals, the Diadochi, successors. Ultimately, Alexander's vast empire fractured into several powerful Hellenistic kingdoms. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, ruled by Ptolemy Isoter and his descendants, including Cleopatra. The Seleucid Empire in Mesopotamia, Syria, and Persia, ruled by Seleucus I Nicator and his successors. The Antigonid Kingdom in Macedon and mainland Greece, ruled by Antigonus I Monophthalmus and his descendants. Other smaller kingdoms emerged, such as the Attalid Kingdom of Pergamum. These Hellenistic kingdoms, though governed by Macedonian Greek elites, continued Alexander's policy of Hellenization, fostering vibrant new cultural centers like Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamum. Greek became the lingua franca of commerce and administration, and Greek art and philosophy spread far and wide. This era saw monumental advancements in science, mathematics, and philosophy, but also a shift from the intimate civic life of the polis to the grand scale of kingdoms and empires. Alexander's reign was short but cataclysmic. He forever altered the political and cultural map of the ancient world. He shattered the Persian Empire, opened up the East to Greek influence, and forged a legacy as one of history's greatest military commanders. His conquests marked the definitive end of the classical Greek era and the beginning of the Hellenistic Age, a period characterized by the widespread diffusion of Greek culture and the emergence of vast, interconnected kingdoms that would dominate the Eastern Mediterranean until the rise of Rome. The successor empires and the Roman shadow, the end of Greek independence. Alexander the Great's sudden death in 323 BCE left a vacuum of power that none could fill, and his vast empire, forged by conquest, almost immediately fractured. His generals, the Diadochi, successors, plunged into decades of brutal and protracted civil wars, each vying for control of the fragmented dominion. These conflicts ultimately gave rise to a new political landscape dominated by a handful of powerful, monarchical Hellenistic kingdoms. While these empires continued to spread Greek culture and foster intellectual life, their relentless internecine warfare and their autocratic nature stood in stark contrast to the independent polis ideal of classical Greece. Their eventual decline paved the way for the rise of an even greater power from the west, Rome. The Wars of the Diadochi, c. 322 to 275 BCE, were a period of intense military struggle and shifting alliances. Generals like Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus, Lysimachus, and Cassander carved out spheres of influence, consolidating their power through continuous warfare and dynastic marriages. By the early 3rd century BCE, a relatively stable, though frequently contested, tripartite division of Alexander's empire emerged. The Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, ruled by Ptolemy Isoter and his descendants. This was the most stable and wealthiest of the Hellenistic kingdoms. Its strategic location, abundant grain production, the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, and rich ancient traditions of pharaonic rule allowed the Ptolemies to build a powerful and enduring dynasty. Alexandria, their capital, became the intellectual and cultural heart of the Hellenistic world, home to the famous library and museum. While ruled by a Greek Macedonian elite, they adopted many Egyptian customs, including divine kingship. The Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I Nicator, this vast kingdom stretched from Asia Minor across Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, encompassing the largest share of Alexander's Asian conquests. Its immense size, however, was also its greatest weakness. It was difficult to govern, suffered from constant internal revolts by diverse subject peoples, and faced challenges from ambitious regional governors. Despite these difficulties, the Seleucids founded numerous cities, many named Antioch or Seleucia, serving as vital centers for Hellenic culture and trade, and they maintained a formidable army, often relying on war elephants. The Antigonid Kingdom of Macedon, ruled by Antigonus I Monophthalmus and his descendants. This kingdom retained control of the Macedonian homeland and often exercised hegemony over mainland Greece. The Antigonids faced constant challenges from the fiercely independent Greek city-states, which often formed leagues like the Aetolian and Achaean leagues to resist Macedonian dominance. Their power in Greece was often maintained through military garrisons and by backing friendly oligarchies or tyrants. Beyond these major powers, other significant Hellenistic states emerged, such as the wealthy Attalid Kingdom of Pergamum in Western Asia Minor, renowned for its art, architecture, and its own magnificent library, and the smaller Greek city-states and federal leagues that fiercely guarded their remaining autonomy. The Hellenistic Age, roughly 323 to 31 BCE, was a period of profound transformation for Greek culture. The traditional polis remained important, but its political independence was largely gone. Instead, the focus shifted to the grand scale of kingdoms. Greek language, Koine Greek, became the lingua franca across a vast cosmopolitan world, facilitating trade and cultural exchange. New cities founded by Alexander and his successors became vibrant centers, attracting scholars, artists, and merchants. This era witnessed remarkable advancements in science, Euclid in geometry, Archimedes in physics and engineering, Eratosthenes calculating the Earth's circumference, philosophy, Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, which emphasized individual well-being in a chaotic world, and art, the Colossus of Rhodes, the winged victory of Samothrace. Yet, this intellectual and artistic flourish occurred within a world defined by monarchical rule and constant, brutal warfare between the successor kingdoms. This constant infighting and the vast wealth accumulated by these kingdoms eventually drew the attention of a rising power in the West, the Roman Republic. Initially, Rome's involvement in the Hellenistic East was limited, primarily responding to pleas for help from smaller Greek states against Macedonian aggression. However, as Rome consolidated its control over Italy and then Carthage, its expansionist ambitions turned eastward. The series of Macedonian Wars, 214 to 168 BCE, saw Rome systematically dismantle Antigonid power in Greece. The decisive battle came at Pydna in 168 BCE, where the Roman legions, with their disciplined flexibility, decisively defeated the Macedonian phalanx, ending their reign. Greece itself was effectively subjugated, initially managed through client states and direct intervention, eventually becoming a Roman province, Achaia, in 146 BCE after the Roman destruction of Corinth. The Seleucid Empire, vast but often unstable, also came under increasing Roman pressure. Internal conflicts, struggles with Egypt, and the rise of new powers like the Parthians weakened it. Rome intervened repeatedly in Seleucid affairs, culminating in the Roman-Syrian War 192 to 188 BCE, which saw the Seleucids decisively defeated and stripped of their territories in Asia Minor. The last vestiges of the Seleucid Empire were finally absorbed into the Roman province of Syria by Pompey the Great in 64 BCE. The Ptolemaic kingdom, while nominally independent for longer, also fell victim to Roman ambition and internal strife. Its immense wealth and strategic importance made it a prime target. The famous relationship between Cleopatra VII and Roman leaders like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony highlights the extent of Roman influence. After the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra by Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Egypt became a Roman province, effectively bringing the Hellenistic age to a definitive close. The absorption of the Hellenistic world by Rome marked the end of an era of independent Greek and Macedonian power. However, it was far from the end of Greek culture. On the contrary, Rome, a great admirer of Greek civilization, became the primary inheritor and disseminator of Hellenism. Greek language, literature, philosophy, and art permeated Roman society, profoundly shaping the Roman Empire. Greek would remain the dominant language in the eastern half of the Roman Empire for centuries, evolving into the Byzantine Empire. The legacy of Alexander's conquests and the subsequent Hellenistic kingdoms ensured that Greek culture, though no longer politically supreme, became a fundamental pillar of the new, vast, Roman-dominated Mediterranean world, profoundly influencing its intellectual, artistic, and administrative landscape. The unseen thread, Greek influence on Roman culture and beyond. The narrative of Greece's political independence concludes with its absorption into the Roman Republic, a seemingly definitive end to its sovereignty. Yet, to view this as the terminus of Greek civilization's impact would be a profound oversight. In fact, the opposite is true. Rome's conquest of the Hellenistic world marked not an end, but a radical new phase of Greek cultural diffusion. The conquerors were, in many respects, conquered by the sophistication and richness of Greek art, literature, philosophy, and learning. This profound and pervasive Hellenization of Rome ensured that the legacy of Greece would not only endure but would be amplified and transmitted across a vast empire, ultimately becoming a foundational pillar of Western civilization and shaping much of the modern world. From the very early days of the Roman Republic, even before the military conquests of the East, Greek influence had begun to trickle into Roman society. Etruscan culture, which heavily influenced early Rome, had already absorbed many Greek elements through trade and contact with Magna Graecia. However, it was the direct military and political engagement with the Greek cities of Magna Graecia, Sicily, and later the Hellenistic East that opened the floodgates. As Roman legions marched into Greece and Asia Minor, they encountered a civilization far more advanced in intellectual and artistic pursuits than their own. Roman elites, particularly in the later Republic and early Empire, developed a deep admiration for Greek culture. it became fashionable, almost mandatory, for wealthy Roman families to educate their sons in Greek, often sending them to study in Athens or Rhodes, the great centers of philosophy and rhetoric. Greek tutors were highly prized, and Greek literature was widely read and imitated. This widespread adoption of Greek learning and aesthetics was eloquently summarized by Horace's famous line, Graecia captiferum victorum sepiditi artis intellit agresti latio. Conquered Greece took captive her rude conqueror and brought the arts into rustic Latium. The spheres of Greek influence on Rome were vast and comprehensive. Literature and rhetoric. Roman literature, from epic poetry to drama to historical writing, was heavily indebted to Greek models. Virgil's Aeneid, while a distinctly Roman epic, drew inspiration from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Roman playwrights like Plautus and Terence adapted Greek comedies. Roman historians like Livy and Tacitus followed the stylistic and analytical traditions of Herodotus and Thucydides. Greek rhetoric, perfected by figures like Demosthenes, became the bedrock of Roman public speaking and legal argument, crucial for political advancement in the Republic. Cicero, the great Roman orator, was deeply steeped in Greek philosophical and rhetorical traditions. Philosophy. While the Romans were more pragmatic and less inclined to abstract thought than the Greeks, Greek philosophy profoundly shaped their worldview, particularly Stoicism and Epicureanism. Stoicism, with its emphasis on virtue, duty, reason, and resilience in the face of adversity, resonated deeply with Roman values and found adherents among prominent Romans like Seneca and the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Epicureanism, advocating for the pursuit of tranquility through moderation, also found its proponents. Art and architecture. Roman art was a direct continuation and adaptation of Greek forms. Roman sculptors often copied Greek masterpieces and Roman architecture, while developing its own distinctive elements like the arch and concrete, adopted Greek orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and temple forms. The Romans were particularly adept at grand-scale public works, but their aesthetic sensibility was fundamentally shaped by Greek ideals of harmony, proportion, and idealized human forms. Religion and mythology. Roman religion, though possessing its own unique deities and rituals, readily absorbed Greek mythology and syncretized its gods with Greek counterparts, e.g., Jupiter as Zeus, Neptune as Poseidon, Venus as Aphrodite. The rich tapestry of Greek myths became interwoven with Roman cultural narratives, providing a shared mythological language across the empire. Language. While Latin remained the official language of administration and the western half of the empire, Koine Greek continued to be the lingua franca of the Eastern Roman Empire. In major cities like Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople, Greek was the language of commerce, culture, and intellectual discourse. This linguistic duality persisted for centuries, leading to the eventual split of the Roman Empire into Latin-speaking West and Greek-speaking East, the Byzantine Empire. Science and medicine. Greek scientific and medical knowledge, accumulated during the classical and Hellenistic periods, was preserved, translated, and further developed by Roman scholars. Galen, a Greek physician working in Rome, became one of the most influential medical writers of antiquity, whose works shaped medical practice for over 1,000 years. The Roman Empire, by its sheer vastness and administrative efficiency, became the primary vehicle for the transmission of this Hellenic heritage. Wherever Rome established its presence, Greek cultural elements often followed, either directly or mediated through Roman adaptations. The roads, infrastructure, and Pax Romana provided the framework for a widespread cultural synthesis. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Greek learning continued to thrive in the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire, centered on Constantinople. Here, Greek was not merely adopted but remained the native language and the language of high culture. Byzantine scholars preserved and copied ancient Greek texts, acting as crucial custodians of this intellectual heritage during the European Dark Ages. When the Renaissance dawned in Western Europe, the rediscovery of these Greek texts, often brought by Byzantine scholars fleeing the Ottoman conquest, sparked a renewed interest in classical learning and directly fueled the intellectual ferment that characterized the rebirth of Western thought. In essence, while Greece lost its political independence, its cultural influence only expanded, transforming its conquerors and establishing itself as an enduring intellectual and artistic wellspring. The unseen thread of Hellenism wove itself through the fabric of the Roman Empire, was preserved and enriched by Byzantium, and ultimately provided the critical intellectual and aesthetic foundations upon which much of Western civilization would be built. From the principles of democracy and philosophy to the aesthetics of art and architecture, the legacy of ancient Greece continues to resonate, a timeless testament to a civilization that, though politically subdued, culturally conquered the world. Echoes through time. The enduring legacy of ancient Greece. The narrative of ancient Greece, from its fragmented beginnings to its eventual absorption into the Roman Empire, is a journey of remarkable innovation, profound intellectual exploration, and epic human endeavor. Though the political independence of the polis ultimately faded, the ideas, institutions, and artistic achievements forged in that crucible did not. Instead, they became an unseen, yet indelible, thread woven through the fabric of Western civilization, continuing to resonate and shape our world in countless ways. The enduring legacy of ancient Greece is not merely a historical curiosity but a living inheritance, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and aspiration. At the very heart of this legacy lies the audacious experiment of democracy. Born in the turmoil of Athens, the concept of rule by the people, though limited to male citizens, established a radical precedent for self-governance. The principles of civic participation, equality before the law, isonomia, and freedom of speech, isagoria, championed by figures like Solon and Cleisthenes, provided a foundational blueprint for later democratic movements. While modern democracies are vastly different, the very language we use to describe our political systems, from democracy itself to politics, from polis and citizenship, derives directly from this Athenian innovation. The constant Athenian struggle with the tension between individual liberty and collective responsibility remains a perennial challenge in contemporary democratic societies. Beyond politics, Greek intellectual curiosity laid the groundwork for virtually every field of Western thought. Philosophy, from the pre-Socratics' attempts to understand the natural world to the ethical inquiries of Socrates, the systematic metaphysics and political theory of Plato, and the comprehensive logic and empirical observation of Aristotle, Greek philosophy established the fundamental questions and methods of rational inquiry. Our concepts of ethics, epistemology, logic, and political philosophy are deeply rooted in their foundational contributions. Science and mathematics. Thinkers like Thales, Pythagoras, Euclid, Archimedes, and Hippocrates pioneered deductive reasoning, geometry, mechanics, and observational medicine. Their insistence on rational explanation over mythological narratives was a critical step toward the scientific method, and their discoveries formed the bedrock of scientific understanding for millennia. History. Herodotus and Thucydides transformed historical writing from mere chronicling into a rigorous discipline of inquiry, analysis, and critical assessment of sources, seeking to understand the causes and consequences of human actions. Thucydides' dispassionate analysis of the Peloponnesian War remains a timeless study of power politics and human nature. Art and architecture. The Greek pursuit of arete excellence in all forms found its apotheosis in their artistic output. Their sculpture, striving for idealized human forms and dynamic naturalism, set aesthetic standards that profoundly influenced Renaissance and neoclassical art. Their architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and the principles of harmony, proportion, and balance continue to inform Western design, from public buildings to private residences. literature and drama. From the epic poetry of Homer, which shaped Western literary tradition, to the lyrical verses of Sappho and the powerful tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, Greek literature explored universal human themes of fate, justice, suffering, and morality. Greek comedy, with Aristophanes at its peak, provided biting social and political commentary. The very structure of Western theater owes its origins to the Dionysian festivals of Athens. Athletics. The Olympic Games, with their emphasis on physical prowess, fair competition, and the pursuit of individual excellence, resonate directly in the modern Olympic movement, a global testament to the enduring power of the Greek ideal of healthy competition. The pathway for this extraordinary legacy to reach us was multifaceted. The Roman Empire, in its conquest of the Hellenistic world, acted as a crucial conduit, absorbing, adapting, and disseminating Greek cultural achievements across its vast dominion. Greek remained the lingua franca of the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire, ensuring the preservation of vast collections of Greek texts and knowledge during Europe's Dark Ages. Later, the rediscovery of these texts during the Renaissance in Western Europe sparked an intellectual awakening that directly led to the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, and the modern world. Even today, in our language, our art, our political discourse, our scientific methodologies, and our fundamental questions about the human condition, we engage in a continuous dialogue with the ancient Greeks. Their insights into democracy, the nature of justice, the pursuit of knowledge, and the complexities of human experience remain profoundly relevant. The legacy of ancient Greece reminds us that even from a relatively small collection of city-states, the human spirit can conceive of ideas and create works that transcend time and profoundly shape the trajectory of civilization itself.